If you like this story, subscribe please. A woman in Alolan Vale's bed was wearing Alolan's silver robe. That was the first thing Alolan noticed when the steward opened the carved oak doors of the ministry. Not the fire in the bluestone. Not the trays of sugared plums on the low table. Not the fresh white lilies that had replaced the rosemary Alolan hung there every winter to keep the old drafts out. The robe. Moonsilver wool. Pearl toggles. A narrow line of black stitching at the cuffs where Alolan had repaired the sleeve herself after a border storm tore it 3 winters ago. Lady Morel Ashbrook sat in it, as if it had been laid out for her by fate and not stolen from the wardrobe in the next room. She was a grown woman, soft-faced and pale-haired, with the practiced fragility of someone who knew exactly how to turn silence into accusation. She tucked her bare feet under the chair Alolan had carried up from the lower hall when Garrick's mother could no longer climb stairs. Alolan's pet cow stood beside Alolan's skirts and stared. Button was a miniature Highland moon cow, round as a wool cushion, with cream-colored curls falling over one eye and a silver bell at her throat. She was fully grown despite her size, and she had never forgiven anyone for mistaking her for decorative livestock. Her little horns curled like polished hooks. Her expression, as always, suggested she had judged the room and found it poorly managed. Morel looked at Button and drew the robe closer. "Garrick," she said, in a voice as thin as cracked ice, "I thought the animal would be kept outside." Alpha Garrick Thorne stood by the hearth. He did not look ashamed. That was what made Alolan's chest turn cold. He looked tired. Tired of explanations. Tired of her questions. Tired of her standing in doorways where he wanted her to disappear. "Alolan," he said, "do not start." She had not spoken. Button gave one slow nasal moo. A scribe near the wardrobe flinched. Alolan recognized her. Marnie Pell, 23, junior key clerk, always with ink on one finger and apology in her posture. Marnie had copied winter ration rolls for Alolan every third moon. She stood now with a ring of chamber keys trembling against her skirt. Alolan kept her voice even. "Why is Lady Morel in my suite?" Garrick's jaw tightened. "Her rooms in the East Tower are too cold. The old widow's chambers are not fit for a guest of her rank." "A guest," Alolan said. Morel lowered her lashes. "Please do not make this ugly. I never asked to be a burden." Button leaned forward and sniffed the hem of Alolan's stolen robe. Morel pulled her feet higher onto the chair. Garrick's patience thinned in his eyes. Alolan had seen that look at council tables in grain stores beside sick hearths, whenever she spoke too long about things he preferred to call small. "You can use the side chamber for a few nights," he said. "It is warm enough. Lady Morel needs quiet. The court has been cruel since her husband's passing, and you know how whispers spread." Alolan looked past him to the wall above the hearth. 12 silver seals rested there in a crescent line. Each was the size of a woman's palm, each stamped with the mark of Aluna's duty. Hearth. Gate. Grain. Night watch. Healing Hall. Novice Infirmary. Old Mother's Stairs. Frost Road. Council Bell. Guest Law. Boundary Flame. The Shared Northern Seal. Garrick had never learned which was which. He called them old decorations when he was annoyed. He called them Alolan's little wall of worries when she asked him to sign repairs. He called them tradition when elders were watching. Alolan stepped into the room. Marnie's eyes flicked to her, then away. The clerk's fear sat plain on her face. Not naive fear. Clerk fear. The kind that came from knowing records mattered, and men with titles did not like being recorded. "Alolan," Garrick warned. She walked to the hearth wall. The first seal was warm under her fingers. Hearth seal. Polished by years of her thumb pressing it before dawn to wake the lower kitchens. "Alolan," he said again. She lifted the seal from its hook. The room fell silent. The blue fire in the hearth shrank by half. Morel gasped and gathered Alolan's robe around her knees. "What are you doing?" Alolan held out one hand toward Button. Button stepped forward with solemn importance. Across her fluffy back hung 2 little canvas satchels Alolan used for market apples. One satchel had a crooked embroidered moon. The other had 3 small bite marks from Button's failed attempt to improve it. Alolan dropped the hearth seal into the left satchel. "I am moving to the side chamber," she said. Garrick stared as if she had spoken in a foreign tongue. She took down the gate seal. Somewhere below, an iron door slammed shut by itself. A guard shouted from the corridor. Button's silver bell chimed once. Morel stood so quickly the robe slipped from one shoulder. Garrick, stop her. She is stealing from the crown. Eloin took the grain seal next. The ceiling pipes groaned. From far below came the sound of kitchen maids crying out as ovens cooled at the wrong hour. I am not stealing the Luna's things, Eloin said. She turned with the third seal in her hand and looked at the man who had once sworn before the pack that he would trust her voice above any winter wind. I am taking the Luna's work. Button mooed again, soft and final. Marnie covered her mouth with the back of her hand. For 1 second, Eloin wanted to laugh. For 1 second, she wanted to cry. She did neither. She removed the fourth seal. A cold line cut across her left wrist, sharp enough to make her fingers pause. The old mate mark there, usually dull beneath her sleeve, tightened like frost around a branch. She had worn that mark 7 years. It had warmed when Garrick praised her in public and cooled when he withdrew from her in private. Lately it had been quiet enough to forget. Now it burned cold. Not because she was leaving a room, because the bond knew what Garrick refused to see. She was being removed from a life she had held together with both hands. Eloin, Garrick said, and this time his voice had changed. Too late. She dropped the fourth seal into Button's right satchel. Button sagged a little under the weight, glanced back at Eloin, and made a pitiful chewing motion with her mouth. No apples until we finish, Eloin murmured. Button lowered her head as if she had been denied justice. Morel found her voice first. This is absurd. They are wall tokens. Garrick, surely she cannot take wall tokens. Marnie made a small sound. Everyone looked at her. The junior scribe went pale. Ink stained the side of her thumb. Her eyes slid to the seals, then to Eloin. My lady, Marnie whispered. Garrick's face tightened. Speak properly. Marnie swallowed. Her fingers crushed the key ring against her skirt. The third from the right is tied to the northern frost gate. Eloin nodded. I know. Garrick's brows drew together. What does that mean? Eloin almost smiled. That, more than the stolen robe, broke something in her. She took down the fifth seal. Ask the woman in my chair, she said. She wanted the room. By the time Eloin reached the side chamber, Button had stopped 3 times to look back in moral protest. The satchels were not too heavy. Button was stronger than she looked. She simply objected to unpaid labor. The corridor behind them had become a living list of consequences. The West Hall lamps flickered. A footman tried to open the old mother's stair door and found it locked from the inside, though no one had turned the bolt. The kitchen sent up a servant with flour on both sleeves to ask why the bread ovens had gone cold in the middle of rising. Someone shouted that the council chamber would not release Lord Garrick's chair. Eloin did not stop. She did not hurry either. Running would have made it look like shame. She walked with Button at her side, one hand steady on the little cow's lead, the 12 Luna seals clinking softly in 2 canvas satchels. Her wrists still ached. Each step tugged at the old mate mark, a private coldness under wool. She kept her sleeve low. The side chamber was not a chamber. It had been a storage room for cracked washstands before Eloin turned it into a winter sewing room. The narrow bed had 1 blanket. The window faced a stone wall. The hearth smoked unless the wind came from the south. Morel would have wept at the threshold. Eloin opened the door, stepped in, and set her shoulders back. Button marched to the little rug by the cold hearth, turned in 3 circles, and sat down hard. The silver bell at her throat gave a disappointed tinkle. I know, Eloin said. Button huffed. Eloin unfastened the satchels and laid the 12 seals on the narrow table. One by one, she sorted them into rows by function. Domestic, defensive, medical, border, council. Her hands knew the order even when her wrist protested. Hearth and grain together. Healing hall beside old mother's stairs. Novice infirmary close to night watch. Frost Road and shared northern seal apart from the others because those were not only Greyhaven's concern. They touched the boundary with Frostmere, the Dragon Wolf realm beyond the northern ridge. Garrick had signed the shared charter 4 years ago and then left the daily maintenance to her. He liked signing things in front of banners. He disliked reading maintenance clauses. Eloin was aligning the final seal when a soft knock came. Button lifted her head. Come in, Eloin said. Marnie slipped through the door with a ledger clutched to her chest. She closed the door quickly, as if a wall could hide courage before it fully formed. My lady, she said. I should not be here. No, Eloin said. You should not. Marnie's face fell. But you are, Eloan added. So decide why. The scribe looked down at her ledger. Her lips pressed together. Then she crossed the room and placed it on the table beside the seals. I keep the room logs. I know. And the key turns. I know that too. Marnie nodded too quickly. Lady Morell asked for the suite keys yesterday before supper. Lord Garrick signed the chamber transfer after the moon meal. The stewards moved your clothes at first bell. Eloan's fingers stilled over the council seal. My clothes. Marnie's eyes darted to Button, then back. Only the trunks from the wardrobe. I stopped them from touching the seal cabinet. Button rose with sudden dignity and walked to Marnie. She shoved her soft nose against the scribe's free hand. Marnie froze. She does that when she approves of someone's paperwork, Eloan said. A startled laugh escaped Marnie before she could stop it. Then she looked horrified at herself. Eloan let the laugh remain in the room. It helped. Not enough, but a little. Why did Morell want the suite? Eloan asked. Marnie's expression tightened with the careful misery of a clerk who knew too much and had too little rank. Her family debts came due after her husband's passing. If she is named acting Luna companion for the winter, her household receives guest protection, grain preference, and debt delay. The East Tower would not be enough. The suite makes it look formal. She wanted the room to make the title look real. Yes. Marnie swallowed. And Lord Garrick told the elders it would calm the court. Calm. Eloan almost laughed again. Down the corridor, a guard shouted. A door thudded. Someone cursed the hinges of the council hall. Button chewed quietly on the edge of an empty apple bag. Eloan took it from her mouth. No. Button stared at the bag as if mourning a friend. Marnie looked at the seals. My lady, the northern frost gate is flickering. I saw the warning bead on the registry chain. If it fully fails, Frostmere will send someone. They should. You are not going to put the seal back. Eloan looked at the shared northern seal. It was the only one-edged and blackened silver. Not from damage. From age. The Frostmere wolves used dragon fire in their boundary work, and their metal always held a dark shine. If I put it back quietly, Eloan said, Garrick will tell the court I made a scene and corrected myself after he showed patience. The emergency line is still holding. I am not breaking the road. I am refusing to hide who keeps repairing it. Marnie said nothing. He will keep the room arrangement. Morell will keep the robe. The elders will call me difficult. The seals will keep working, so no one will ask who maintains them. Her wrist pulsed cold again. Eloan flexed her fingers once. Marnie saw it. Her eyes sharpened, not with gossip, but with concern. My lady, your mark. It is old. That does not mean it cannot hurt. Eloan looked at the scribe properly then. There was courage there. Not loud courage. Not the sort that made speeches. Marnie had the kind that lived in records hidden in sleeves and dates written correctly when powerful people preferred empty pages. Can you copy the room log? Eloan asked. Marnie's spine straightened a little. Yes. And the key turns? Yes. And the maintenance list for the seals? Marnie hesitated. That ledger is in the steward's office. Button, having failed to eat the apple bag, walked to the door and pressed her forehead against it. The door opened an inch. Marnie stared. She learned that from watching Kitchen Runners, Eloan said. Do not look impressed. It encourages crime. Button pushed the door wider with one horn and looked back at them. Marnie clutched her ledger to her chest. The steward's office is beside the lower pantry. Button's ears lifted at the word pantry. Eloan took up the shared northern seal. It hummed faintly in her palm, cold and restless. Then we go to the pantry, she said. The lower pantry smelled of dried apples, smoked cheese, rosemary, and trouble. Button found the dried apples first. Eloan had expected that. The pantry had 3 doors, and Button would always choose the one that led most directly to food. This made her unreliable in politics but useful in castles. Marnie followed with the stiff, pale face of someone breaking a rule in real time. She had tucked the ledger under her cloak. Her key ring was wrapped in a strip of cloth to stop it from jingling. Eloan did not rush her. Courage, she had learned, often needed a practical task. Left shelf, Marnie whispered. The steward keeps outgoing requests behind the candle boxes. Eloan lifted a box of beeswax tapers and found 3 folded records beneath it. The first was a chamber transfer signed by Garrick. The second was a winter guest protection petition signed by Morell. The third made Eloan's mouth go flat. Morel had requested temporary access to 3 Luna seals. Hearth. Guest law. Grain. Not the shared northern seal. Not officially. She asked for enough to look legitimate, Marnie said, reading over Alohan's shoulder. Not enough to work. She did not want work. Button, at the apple shelf, made a muffled sound of discovery. Alohan turned. The cow had her nose halfway into a sack. No, Button froze with one dried apple strip hanging from her mouth. Alohan held out her hand. Button chewed once. Button. The cow sighed through her nose and allowed the apple strip to fall into Alohan's palm, damp and defeated. Marnie pressed her lips together. Her shoulders shook. Laugh quietly, Alohan said. Marnie did, a small bright sound in the dark pantry. For 2 breaths, the world became ridiculous instead of cruel. Then a horn sounded from the northern wall. Not a Greyhaven horn. A lower tone. Deeper. It rolled through stone and settled in Alohan's ribs. Frostmere. Marnie went white. They came fast. They were already near the ridge, Alohan said. The Frost Road seal has been weak for weeks. You reported that. 3 times. Marnie's fear shifted. It became anger for half a second before fear swallowed it again. Alohan folded the records and handed them to her. Keep these hidden. Where? Button sneezed into the apple sack. Alohan looked at the cow's satchels. Marnie looked too. No one searches Button, Alohan said. Marnie slid the records into the small inner pocket of the right satchel. Button noticed the lack of apples and looked betrayed. Another horn sounded. This one came from within the castle. The steward's voice carried down the stairwell. The Frostmere envoy is at the main gate. Not envoy, Alohan thought when the air changed. She felt it before she saw him. Not magic in the storybook sense. Not the moon choosing sides or old gods leaning from clouds. Just pressure. The kind that made pack wolves straighten without knowing why. The kind that entered before a high-ranking wolf crossed the threshold. Button stepped closer to Alohan's skirt. Marnie whispered, "Is it him?" Alohan did not ask who she meant. Everyone along the northern border knew the Frostmere ruler's name, though most used it carefully. Rowan Blackmere. Dragon Wolf King of Frostmere. High Alpha of the Ridge Packs. Keeper of the Frost Road. A man with enough authority to make Garrett polite, and enough old dragon fire in his line to make polite sound dangerous. Alohan had never met him. That mattered. If he came into this mess, he would not come for her. Good. She did not need a man arriving because she looked wounded in a hallway. She needed a witness with teeth in the law. The pantry door opened. A guard leaned in, spotted Alohan, and went stiff with relief. Lady Alohan, Lord Garrick requires you in the entrance hall. Does he? The Frostmere King is asking who moved the shared seal. Button gave a pleased moo, as if she had personally arranged the visit. Alohan wiped apple damp from her palm onto a cloth, lifted the satchel strap so the seals rested evenly on Button's back, and looked at Marnie. Bring your ledger. Marnie's eyes widened. Into the hall? Yes. What if Lord Garrick asks why I have it? Tell him the truth. Marnie almost laughed again, but this time there was no humor in it. That is what I am afraid of. Alohan paused. She remembered herself at 23. Not soft, exactly. She had never been soft. But she had believed that if she worked carefully enough, men with power would appreciate clean order when they saw it. They often did. Then they called it theirs. You do not have to speak until you choose to, Alohan said. But if you come, stand where you can hear everything. Marnie looked down at Button, who had found another apple strip somewhere, and was pretending no one could see it. The scribe took a breath. I will stand behind you, she said. No, Alohan opened the pantry door. Stand where the table can see you. The entrance hall of Greyhaven Keep had been built for winter intimidation. Black stone pillars. Silver wolf banners. A ceiling high enough to trap cold air and pride. The old alphas had wanted every visitor to feel small before crossing the second threshold. Alohan had spent 7 years making that hall usable. She had ordered braziers moved closer to the side benches for old guests. She had changed the floor rushes from pine to braided reed after 2 maids slipped carrying soup. She had added the small copper bell beside the steward's desk so kitchen runners did not have to shout across noble conversation. Garrick had called it fussing. Now the braziers burned unevenly, one hot, 2 low, one unlit. The hall looked exactly as it did when men were left alone with grandeur. Cold and badly managed. Rowan Blackmere stood near the central wolf mosaic with 6 Frostmere riders behind him. Elowen had heard women in winter markets describe him with too much breath and not enough sense. They had not exaggerated his height. He stood taller than Garrick by several inches, broad through the shoulders, black hair tied at the nape, a dark northern coat fastened with matte silver clasps. He did not wear a crown. He did not need one. There was a line of old burns scarring along the leather of his left glove, not on his skin. A practical repair. He had not dressed for ceremony. He had dressed to ride through cold. His gaze moved across the hall and stopped at Button. Button stared back with the calm of livestock that had never respected rank. Then his gaze lifted to Elowen. No recognition warmed it. Good. He did not know her. His attention did not soften. It measured. That oddly steadied her. Garrick strode toward her from the foot of the stairs. His face held anger polished into public control. Elowen, he said, low enough that others might not hear if they were kind. Give me the northern seal. No, his eyes flashed. Rowan's voice came from the center of the hall. That answered one question. Garrick turned, forcing a smile that did not suit him. King Rowan, forgive the household disturbance. My Luna has allowed private temper to affect a shared mechanism. I will correct it. My Luna. The words touched the cold line at Elowen's wrist and made it tighten. Morel stood on the lower stair in the silver robe. Someone had pinned a fur wrap over her shoulders. She looked delicate, injured, and perfectly placed for sympathy. Please, Morel said, this is my fault. I only wanted a warm room. I did not know she would do something so drastic. Button stepped forward and shook herself. The seal satchels clinked. Several guards stared. Rowan looked from the satchels to Elowen. You moved more than the shared seal. I moved all 12. A murmur ran through the hall. Garrick's hand flexed. She is making a point. I was leaving the room assigned to another woman, Elowen said. I took the duties assigned to me. Morel's lips parted. Duties do not live in wall ornaments. Marnie made a tiny sound behind Elowen. Not fear this time. Offense. Rowan heard it. His eyes cut briefly to the scribe, then back. Lord Thorn, he said, Frostmere's northern medical cart is trapped beyond the frost gate with 3 fevered riders and a wagon of winter tincture. My grain sleds are stopped behind them. My night patrol cannot cross back to my side of the ridge. The shared warning flame went out 27 minutes ago. Garrick's face changed. Not enough for guilt. Enough for calculation. Elowen can restore it, he said. Can she? Rowan asked. The question was aimed at Elowen. She felt every face turn. Button leaned against her knee. Elowen rested one hand on the cow's wool, grounding herself in warmth and hay smell. Yes, she said. If the seals are returned under correct authority, with witness record, and if the northern seal has not been tampered with. Garrick spoke too quickly. It has not. Elowen looked at him. He had not known what the northern seal did half an hour ago. Rowan's gaze did not leave her face. You classified them. I maintained them. Show me. Garrick stepped in. King Rowan, with respect, this is an internal matter. My household will. No, Rowan said. The word was not loud. The hall heard it anyway. He took one step toward Button, then stopped at a distance that did not crowd Elowen. The shared seal is no longer internal. Frostmere is affected. Morel's voice trembled. Surely you do not mean to let her humiliate the Alpha over a bedroom. Elowen looked at Morel then. The robe was too long on her. The cuffs covered her fingers. Elowen had repaired those cuffs after sitting through a night of petitions while Garrick slept through a headache 2 rooms away. It was never about the bedroom, Elowen said. Rowan glanced at the robe, then at the wall behind the stairs, where a faint line of frost had begun to creep along a decorative arch. No, he said. It was not. Something in Elowen's chest shifted. Not softened. Not yet. Recognized. Garrick noticed. Of course he did. Men who ignored work often noticed when another man respected it. Elowen, he said, softer now. Give me the seal. We can discuss the rest privately. Privately. That old room where apologies became weather and consequences evaporated. Elowen untied Button's right satchel and removed the shared northern seal. The hall lights flickered blue against its dark edge. Garrick held out his hand. Elowen walked past him and placed the seal on the central table. Then she looked at Rowan. If Frostmere wants the gate restored, she said, there will be a record. The corner of his mouth moved. Barely. Then let us make one. They began in the lower council room, because the upper chamber had locked Lord Garrick's chair in place and refused to release it. No one mentioned this twice. Button did. She kept trying to sit in front of Garrick's substitute chair, forcing a steward to lure her away with a carrot end. Each time, Button accepted the carrot and returned to the same spot. Eloan did not smile. She wanted to. Marnie sat at the recorder's bench with 2 ledgers open. Her knuckles were pale around the quill. She did not look at Garrick unless duty required it. Rowan stood at the end of the table where he could see the seals, the door, and everyone's hands. He had removed his riding gloves. His hands were large, clean, and marked with faint pale lines that looked like old burns or old cold. Eloan did not ask. She had learned not to make wounds into conversation before trust had earned them. Garrick paced behind his chair. Morel sat in a cushioned seat near the hearth, wrapped in Eloan's robe, with a cup of elder tea she had not touched. The elders filtered in with the expressions of men who preferred decisions already made. Eloan placed the seals in rows. Domestic, defensive, medical, border, council. Rowan watched without interrupting. That was new. Garrick used silence as pressure. Rowan used it as attention. Eloan did not decide what that meant. She only noticed the difference. Marnie began the record. Matter of shared Northern Seal disturbance, Greyhaven Keep, Winter Moon, first hearing. Garrick stopped pacing. Hearing is a strong word. Rowan looked at him. Your preferred word did not open my frost gate. Button sneezed. A few servants near the wall lowered their faces. Morel set down her cup. Must the animal stay? Eloan answered before Garrick could. The animal is carrying the disputed property. Button lifted her head as if promoted. Rowan's mouth moved again. Marnie wrote very quickly. Garrick pinched the bridge of his nose. Eloan, enough. Return the Northern Seal. We will address your feelings afterward. My feelings did not close the frost gate. No, your temper did. The old mark at her wrist chilled. Eloan folded her hands, so no one would see her fingers tighten. Rowan saw anyway. His gaze dropped for the length of one breath. Then he looked back at Garrick. What maintenance does the shared seal require? Rowan asked. Garrick's mouth opened. Nothing came. Eloan felt the hall remember with her. 3 winter reports. 2 repair petitions. 1 argument in this very room when Garrick told her no one cared whether the frost road bead flickered at moonrise. Marnie stared at her ledger. Morel looked confused, then annoyed that confusion had arrived in public. Rowan turned to Eloan. Lady Vale. He used her family name. Not my Luna. Not Garrick's Luna. Lady Vale. She picked up the shared Northern Seal. It must be warmed before first frost, cooled during thaw, fed with signed authority from both border houses, and paired with the frost road bead every 7th night. Garrick frowned. Fed. Witnessed, she corrected, because now was not the time for old border shorthand. Signed into record. If authority shifts, the seal withdraws until it knows who holds responsibility. Rowan nodded once. That matches Frostmere law. Garrick's pride took the hit badly. If this was so important, why was I not told? Marnie's quill stopped. Eloan looked at him for a long moment. I told you on Snowmelt Eve, she said. You said I worried because I had no talent for celebration. The council room quieted. Button chewed on nothing, jaw moving thoughtfully. Garrick's face colored. That was not an official report. Marnie's voice came thin but clear. It was. Every head turned. The scribe looked as if she wanted to crawl beneath the bench. She did not. I copied it, she said. 3rd ledger. Blue tie. Lady Eloan filed it with the steward's office and requested Lord Garrick's counter-signature. Garrick stared at her. You are certain? Marnie's chin trembled. Yes, my lord. Rowan said nothing. That helped more than a speech would have. He did not rescue Marnie from her own statement. He let it stand. Eloan looked at the scribe and gave a small nod. Marnie held the quill tighter and kept her seat. Morel leaned forward. Even if that is true, it does not excuse removing the seals. A proper Luna would never endanger others to make a point. Eloan placed the shared Northern Seal down. The words were clever enough to wound if Eloan had been alone. She was not alone. She had Button. She had Marnie's record. She had 12 silver pieces of work on a table, and a Frostmere king whose gate was closed. I agree, Eloan said. Morel blinked. A proper Luna should not endanger others, Eloin continued. That is why no one who does not understand these seals should be placed in the Luna suite and presented as acting authority. Morel's teacup clicked against its saucer. Garrick said, "No one gave her authority over the seals." Marnie looked down at the room log. Eloin saw the movement. So did Rowan. "Read," he said. Marnie's face drained. Garrick's voice turned sharp. "This is still my council room." Rowan rested his fingertips on the edge of the table. "And my border road is still closed." Silence. Marnie swallowed and read. Chamber transfer, signed by Lord Garrick Thorne. Lady Morel Ashbrook to occupy Luna's suite under guest protection. Access granted to hearth service, wardrobe, guest law bell, private stair, and attending stewards. That says nothing of seals, Garrick said. Marnie looked at the second page. Her voice shook harder. Supplemental petition from Lady Morel Ashbrook, requesting temporary use of Luna hearth, guest law, and grain marks to maintain proper dignity of the suite. Morel stood. That was ceremonial. Button chose that moment to walk to Morel's chair and sniff the hem of Eloin's robe again. Morel stepped back. The robe caught on the chair arm. A folded scrap fell from the pocket. No one moved. Eloin looked at the scrap. It had a dark silver edge. Not paper. Seal cloth. Morel snatched for it. Button got there first, not because she understood evidence, but because the cloth smelled faintly of dried apples. The cow lifted it in her mouth and trotted proudly back to Eloin. Marnie made a strangled sound. Rowan picked up the cloth from Button's mouth with 2 fingers. A small crescent of darkened silver was wrapped inside. Eloin's stomach went still. The frost road bead. Not the shared northern seal. Its paired bead. Smaller. Easy to hide. Necessary to restart the gate. Morel went white beneath her careful powder. "I found it loose," she said. Lord Denvey said the small border piece would make the suite look properly authorized until the elders approved the winter arrangement. Lord Denvey's hand tightened around the head of his cane. There was Eloin thought. Not clever treason. Worse. Borrowed authority treated like furniture. Rowan's expression did not change, which made the silence around him colder. Button sneezed apple breath onto her slipper. Eloin looked at Garrick. He was staring at the bead as if the room had changed shape around him. For the first time that day, his certainty cracked. Rowan set the bead beside the seal. "Record that," he said. Marnie's quill moved. This time it did not shake. The frost gate had to be tested before nightfall. That was not Eloin's preference. It was the weather's. A winter wind moved down from the ridge after sunset, and if the boundary flame remained out, the road would ice through by morning. Frostmere's medical cart would lose time. Greyhaven's lower villages would lose heat along the shared line. None of that cared who had taken whose room. Eloin changed before they rode out. Not into finery. The Luna robe still hung on Morel's shoulders, and Eloin did not want it back in that room. She chose a dark wool gown, riding boots, and the old black cloak with mended seams that actually kept weather out. Button refused to be left behind. The cow planted herself in front of the stable door and sat down. 2 stablemen tried persuasion. One tried a handful of oats. Button accepted the oats, chewed slowly, and remained seated. Rowan watched from beside his black horse. Eloin kept her face calm. She believes the seals are still her cargo. Is she wrong? Button flicked one ear. Eloin considered the satchels, now holding only 3 border pieces. No, then she comes. Garrick made a rough sound. This is not a market outing. No, Rowan said. It is an investigation into a boundary failure created inside your house. The cow has preserved more evidence than half the room. Button rose at once, as if the matter had been settled by appropriate praise. Eloin turned away before her mouth betrayed her. The ride to the Frost Gate took 20 minutes through the North Orchard and down the old stone road. Frost lay in the grass like ground glass. The sky had that low pewter color that came before night snow. Garrick rode on Eloin's left, stiff with injured authority. Rowan rode on her right, but half a length back. Not leading her. Not trailing her. Close enough that if her horse slipped, he could reach her. Far enough that no one could say he touched what was not his. Eloin noticed. She told herself noticing was not deciding. Button trotted behind, led by a Frostmere rider who looked increasingly unsure whether he was guarding royal evidence or being supervised by it. At the Frost Gate, the problem showed itself plainly. The arch of dark stone stood between two winter pines, its center filled with a pale shimmer that should have moved like steady breath. Instead it stuttered. Frost crawled over one side. The warning flame at the base was out. Beyond the gate, blurred by unstable air, waited a line of sleds and riders. A small rider? No. Eloan narrowed her eyes. A slight adult rider bundled under blankets. She forced the old protective panic down. No fragile passengers were exposed on the road. Good. She could think. Rowan dismounted. Can you open it safely? Eloan stepped down before Garrick could answer for her. I can open it enough to bring them through. Full repair requires council witness and both authorities. Garrick dismounted too. I am here. Eloan looked at him. The old mate marked Titan once. You are here, she said. Authority is another matter. His face hardened. Rowan said, explain. Eloan removed the northern seal and frost road bead from Button's satchel. Button tried to follow the bead with her nose. Eloan gently pushed her away. No apples in this one. What's in sight? The seal withdrew because its line of responsibility was broken, Eloan said. The suite was reassigned. Seal access was requested by a guest. The paired bead was removed without record. The mechanism does not know who is carrying the duty. It knows you? Rowan asked. It knows my maintenance. That is not the same thing. No, she looked at the flickering gate. But it is often stronger. For a moment, he did not answer. Wind lifted the edge of her cloak. Her fingers were already stiff from holding the cold seal. She tucked two fingers under her palm to keep them moving. Rowan saw. He extended his hand, then stopped before touching the seal. Eloan. It was the first time he had used her given name. She looked at him. His voice lowered enough that it did not carry to Garrick. That metal is dragon-tempered. It will bite through a wolf mark if the authority line is torn. I know. You have done this before? I have prevented it before. His jaw shifted. Not anger at her. She had spent enough years reading rooms to know the difference. He held his hand near the seal. Heat moved from his palm. Not flame. Not spectacle. Practical warmth. She could have stepped away. She did not. The cold eased in her fingers. Tell me where to stand, he said. Eloan remembered the hall. His attention. His refusal to move ahead of her. Not in front of me. His eyes held hers for one measured breath. Beside you, then. He stepped to her right. No closer than needed. Closer than before. Eloan placed the seal into the notch at the gate base and set the bead over it. The mark at her wrist flared cold. Her knees threatened to soften. She locked them. Garrick said, Eloan. She ignored him. The seal hummed. The gate shimmer steadied, then bucked. A gust of winter air shoved through the arch, hard enough to drive her back. Rowan caught her at the waist. Only for a second. His hand was firm through cloak and gown, warm at her side, and gone before her breath could settle around it. Again, he asked. Not are you hurt? Not let me. Again. As if he already knew she would choose the work. Eloan swallowed once. Again. This time, when she pressed the seal, Rowan put one hand on the stone beside hers. His sleeve brushed her knuckles. Heat moved through the gate. Her mark fought it, then eased. The shimmer opened to a narrow passage. Now, Eloan called. The first Frostmere sled crossed. Then the second. The riders came through with stiff faces and grateful nods. One of Rowan's captains began counting supplies. Marnie, who had ridden in the second group from the keep, wrote down each arrival with fierce concentration. When the last medical cart passed, the gate flickered but held. Eloan removed her hand. Her fingers trembled once. She curled them into her palm. Garrick saw this time. His face changed in a way she did not have room to interpret. Rowan did not look away from the gate. Temporary passage restored. Full authority unresolved. Marnie wrote it down. Button, bored by law, found a patch of frost grass and began to eat. The Frostmere rider holding her lead looked relieved. Garrick walked toward Eloan. You should have told me the seal hurt you. The words landed badly. They sounded almost like concern, but they carried accusation under it. As if her silence had been another duty she failed. Eloan looked at him with the gate's cold still in her bones. I told you the seal was failing, she said. You told me to stop making winter dramatic. A Frostmere captain coughed into his glove. Button mooed without looking up. Rowan turned then. The council record will include that. Garrick's eyes went to him. Eloan felt the old room between them collapse a little more. Not because Rowan defended her. Because someone outside Garrick's house had heard the sentence and treated it as fact. That night, Greyhaven Keep pretended to sleep. It failed. Doors clicked at wrong hours. Servants crossed halls with candles and whispered around corners. Somewhere below, the kitchen tried to coax heat from ovens that did not trust anyone. The old mother's stair had reopened after Eloan temporarily warmed the service seal, but the steps complained with a high whine each time someone used them. The castle was not in danger. It was inconvenienced. Eloan found the distinction satisfying. She sat in the side chamber with the domestic seals lined before her and Button asleep across the threshold. The cow had finally received 2 dried apple strips and had forgiven the world enough to snore. Marnie sat on the floor near the bed, copying records by candlelight. "You can use the chair," Eloan said. Marnie shook her head. "If I sit on the floor, I can spread pages without smearing them. You sit on the floor because you are still ready to hide if someone knocks." The quill stopped. Marnie looked down. Eloan regretted the sharpness, but not the truth. "I am not mocking you," she said. "I know the posture." Marnie touched the edge of the ledger. "My mother was a laundry widow. She said a woman without rank survives by being useful and forgettable. And you listened." "I survived." Eloan nodded. "Yes." Marnie looked at the door where Button blocked most of the frame with wool and stubbornness. "You were useful. They did not forget you." "No. They remembered when something broke." The words hung quietly. Then Button snorted in her sleep. Marnie's mouth twitched. Eloan allowed herself a small smile. A knock came. Button woke, lifted her head, and did not move. The door opened only as far as the cow allowed. Garrick stood outside. For the first time since Eloan had known him, he looked uncertain how to enter a room in his own keep. "Move the cow," he said. Button stared at him. "No," Eloan said. His eyes lifted to her. Marnie quietly gathered the copied pages. Eloan shook her head once. Marnie stopped. Stayed visible. "Good." Garrick noticed. His mouth tightened, but he did not order her out. "Progress, perhaps. Too late, certainly." "Eloan," he said. "I came to speak without Frostmere ears. There are Greyhaven records present." His gaze flicked to Marnie. "Must she write everything?" "She writes what people later deny." Marnie's eyes stayed on the page, but her quill hand steadied. Garrick exhaled. "I made a mistake with the suite." Eloan waited. He disliked silence when it belonged to someone else. "I was trying to prevent unrest," he continued. "Morel's family has supporters. The elders pity her. If I refused her protection, they would say I lacked mercy. You gave her my room. I did not think you would care about the room. There it was. Not cruelty exactly. Worse in some ways. Carelessness dressed as knowledge. You thought I would care about the work," Eloan said. "So you left that with me." His expression closed. "I thought you were stronger." Marnie's quill cut too hard into the paper. Button rose. Eloan placed one hand on the cow's head before Button could make a political decision with her horns. "I am," Eloan said. "That is why I know the difference between strength and being used." Garrick looked at her wrist. The mark was hidden, but he had seen the gate. "Did the bond hurt every time you handled the seals?" "Not every time." "Eloan." She did not answer the tone. She had answered that tone for years. "Why did you never tell me?" he asked. Marnie went very still. Eloan looked at Garrick, and for a moment she saw the man who had once walked beside her through the first snow and promised that Greyhaven would be different under them. He had meant it then. She was almost sure. But meaning a promise on the day it is made is not the same as carrying it when it becomes heavy. "I told you the frost road was failing. I told you the mark reacted to border strain. I told you the old mother's stare needed a warmer feed. I told you the wolf nursery seal was too close to the night watch bell." His face had gone pale under the candlelight. "You turned each report into a complaint about my nature," she said. "Too careful. Too cold. Too fond of lists. Too unwilling to let the court breathe. Eloan, do not come here now and make my silence the problem." Button mooed. Soft but well-timed. Marnie's quill moved again. Garrick looked at the cow. "Even your animal judges me. She has been present for most of your decisions today." For one dangerous second, Eloan almost laughed at her own sentence. Garrick did not. "I will restore your suite," he said. Eloan felt nothing leap toward the offer. That told her enough. No, his brows drew together. No. You gave away the suite because you believed the room could be separated from the work. I will not go back into that room under the old understanding. What do you want? The question should have been offered years earlier. Eloin looked at the seals on the table. I want a public council. His jaw hardened. That will embarrass the pack. No. It will inform them. Morel will be ruined. Morel hid the Frost Road bead. She panicked. She petitioned for access to seals she did not understand, so she could use my duties as a costume. Garrick flinched at that. Good. She will return the robe, he said. Eloin looked at him for a long moment. He truly believed the robe was near the center of it. That exhausted her more than anger could. Keep the robe, she said. Eloin, I want the room converted into an independent Luna office. Not a wife's chamber. Not a guest suite. A working office with public records, seal storage, and clerks answerable to the office, not the Alpha's moods. Marnie forgot to write. Garrick stared. You would turn our suite into a bureaucracy? Button shook her bell. Eloin looked at the small cow, then back to him. Yes, she said. A warm one. By morning, Morel had stopped performing fragility and begun performing injury. It was an important distinction. Fragility made people careful around her. Injury made people angry for her. Eloin could see the shift as soon as she entered the breakfast hall. Morel sat near the front hearth in a pale gown, not the silver robe. Good. Her hair was unpinned just enough to suggest a difficult night. A few elder wives clustered around her with cups of tea and sharp glances for anyone who did not look sympathetic quickly enough. Garrick stood at the high table grim. Rowan occupied a lower place by choice, one boot angled beneath the chair, a cup of black coffee untouched near his hand. His Frostmere captains sat behind him. He did not look rested. He looked prepared. Eloin entered with Marnie on one side and Button on the other. Button wore the satchels again. Marnie had brushed her until she looked like a cream-colored storm cloud with hooves. Several people turned. Someone whispered, the cow. Button, hearing her title, lifted her head. Eloin walked to the center aisle. Morel dabbed under one eye with a cloth. I hardly slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard doors locking. I do not know how anyone can call this mercy. Eloin did not stop. She had learned long ago not to argue with a performance before the audience understood the stage. Garrick said, the council is set for moonrise. Until then, we will keep order. Rowan looked at Eloin. The frost gate held through first light. Good. Temporary. I know. Morel's voice trembled. Temporary is what frightens us all, is it not? One woman's anger, and the whole keep must wait to see whether she feels generous. A few elders murmured agreement. Button moved toward the nearest fruit bowl. Eloin caught the lead without looking down. No, Button's ears drooped. Rowan watched this exchange with the grave attention of a man observing a treaty negotiation. Morel continued, if I made mistakes, I made them because I was frightened. I am alone here. I have no husband. No household secure enough to defend me. I thought Lady Eloin, of all women, would understand what it means to be displaced. There it was. Not just pity. A hook. Morel was asking the room to make Eloin prove kindness by surrendering again. Eloin looked at the elder wives. Most would understand fear of losing home. Several had lived under husbands who controlled rooms, keys, and accounts. Morel knew her audience. Eloin could not answer with cold law alone. She needed something simpler. She stepped to the long side table, lifted an empty bread plate, and placed it before Morel. Morel blinked. Eloin took the grain seal from Button's satchel and set it on the plate. Would you like this one? Morel drew back. What? The grain seal. If you wish to hold Aluna's place, begin here. At noon, the lower villages submit winter shortage requests. If you approve too much, Greyhaven stores fail by thaw. If you approve too little, the mill widows go hungry. The seal does not care if you are frightened. It answers to the hand that has done the count. The hall quieted. Morel stared at the silver disc. Eloin added the hearth seal. Or this. The North Infirmary hearth burns too hot when the moon falls. It will make the resting wolves restless if not balanced before dusk. It took me 3 months to learn the right feed. She placed the healing hall seal beside it. This one wakes the old tincture cabinet. Touch it without training, and the cabinet locks for a day. Morel's face flushed. You are humiliating me. No, Aloan said. I am offering you the work. Morel's chin rose with the brittle courage of a woman who had never had to lift anything heavier than sympathy. Fine, she said. If touching a disc is all that is required. She set 2 fingers on the grain seal. Nothing happened. Not a spark. Not a hum. Not even the faint silver pulse the seal gave when Aloan carried it past the storehouse records. Morel pressed harder, as if dignity could be forced through metal. Button leaned over the plate, sneezed, and the hearth seal beside it glowed half an inch. The hall went silent. Rowan looked at the plate, then at the cow. The cow appears more qualified. Someone near the back made a noise like a cough being buried under a laugh. Button lifted her head as if accepting appointment. Button stretched her neck toward the bread basket. Aloan gently pushed her back. Not your work either. Someone in the back snorted, and hit it badly. Morel stood. Her softness slipped. You think you are the only woman who has ever carried anything. Aloan looked at her. No. That is why I am not letting you use women's pain as a curtain for theft. The elder wives went very still. Marnie, behind Aloan, wrote the sentence down. Garrick said, enough. Rowan set his cup down. I disagree. Every head shifted. He rose slowly. Lady Ashbrook has claimed fear. Lady Vale has offered duty. The distinction matters. Morel looked at him with an expression halfway between appeal and calculation. Your Majesty, surely a ruler understands mercy. I do. His gaze moved to the seals on the plate. I also understand roads frozen by borrowed dignity. A ripple went through the room. Aloan did not look at him, but heat touched the back of her neck. Not embarrassment. Something more inconvenient. Garrick saw it. His eyes narrowed. Marnie stepped closer to Aloan and whispered, The elder by the left pillar is Lord Denvay. He signed Lady Morel's debt delay. Aloan kept her face still. You are certain? I copied it last winter. There was the next piece. Not complicated. Not hidden in a maze. Simple pressure. Morel needed Luna appearance to protect her household. Lord Denvay needed her protected because he had backed her debts. Garrick needed the elder's calm. Everyone had placed the cost where it usually went. On Aloan's back. Button chose that moment to break free of Aloan's relaxed fingers and push her nose into the bread basket. The hall watched the cow emerge with half a roll. Aloan closed her eyes for one breath. Button. The cow froze. Drop it. Button chewed once. Rowan's voice, low beside her, said, She is considering jurisdiction. Aloan looked at him despite herself. His face remained sober. His eyes were not. The corner of her mouth lifted before she could stop it. Button dropped the roll. Too late to save it. Marnie wrote nothing for the first time all morning. She was too busy not laughing. Morel's face tightened with fury. Good. The audience had moved half an inch away from pity. Sometimes half an inch was enough for truth to enter. The hours before council did not pass. They stacked. Reports came in layers. The frost gate held, but weakly. The old mother's stare warmed after Aloan authorized a temporary feed. The kitchens could bake again if she placed the hearth seal for 1 hour under witness. The Wolf Nursery sent a polite request, written by a nurse with more sense than rank, asking whether the Luna office was still functioning. Aloan kept each answer short. Temporary. Under record. No private restoration. Garrick sent 3 messages. She answered none directly. Morel sent one apology through an elder wife. Aloan returned it with a note requesting the missing wardrobe inventory. Marnie copied everything. By late afternoon, the side chamber looked less like exile and more like a field office. Ledgers stood in stacks. Seals rested in order. Button napped beneath the table with a strip of ribbon caught on one horn and refused all attempts to remove it. Marnie had gained color in her face. She still startled at footsteps, but each time she returned to the record faster. Aloan watched her without saying so. Some women did not need praise while they were building courage. Praise made them visible too soon. A knock came at the open door. Rowan stood there with a folded cloak over one arm. Button lifted her head, saw no apples, and lowered it again. Aloan rose. Is the gate failing? No, then why are you here? Marnie suddenly found urgent business in the corner ledger. Rowan's eyes moved once to the scribe. To return something before council. He held out the cloak. It was not Aloan's. Dark northern wool, lined with soft fur at the collar, fastened by a plain silver clasp. It looked warmer than pride. She did not take it. I have a cloak. You have a cloak that lost an argument with Winter 3 years ago. Marnie made a small cough that might have been agreement. Eloan looked at her. Marnie examined her ink bottle with intense loyalty. Rowan stepped inside, but stopped well short of the table. Council halls are cold when people intend to be righteous. I have survived colder rooms. I know. That answer was too quiet. Eloan's fingers brushed the edge of the table. He did not say more. He simply offered the cloak again. She looked at the clasp, then at his hands. If I walk into council wearing your cloak, Garrick will say I have chosen a side. Then do not let me dress you. He laid the cloak across the chair nearest her and stepped back. The choice remains yours. Marnie's quill paused. Eloan should have felt only practicality. Warmth was useful. Frostmere witness was useful. A cloak was cloth, not a vow. But the space he left mattered. Garrick gave things with strings and called them care. Rowan gave a thing and stepped away from the string. She lifted the cloak. It was heavier than expected. Warm from his arm. Her wrist mark chilled once, as if objecting to the change in weather. Eloan ignored it and put the cloak around her shoulders herself. The collar brushed her jaw. The warmth settled over her back. Rowan watched her fasten the clasp with her own hands. Good, he said. Her eyes lifted. Now they cannot say I dressed their Luna. Marnie looked down so fast her hair fell forward. Eloan felt the heat return to her neck. Button chose that moment to stand, walk between them, and push her ribboned horn into the cloak's hem. The clasp nearly popped loose. Eloan caught it. Rowan reached at the same time and stopped before the clasp. The back of his knuckle brushed the edge of her glove. Only a brush. Still, the warmth went straight through wool, skin, and all the careful reasons she had built around herself. He did not close his hand. He waited. Eloan fastened the clasp herself. Your cow disapproves of diplomacy, Rowan said. She disapproves of being excluded from it. Button tried to eat the ribbon on her own horn. Marnie gave up and laughed. It was not quiet this time. The sound startled her. She covered her mouth, then slowly lowered her hand. No one punished her. Eloan looked at Rowan. At council you witness. You do not argue my case. I know. If Frostmere makes the demand, Garrick will say I hid behind your power. I know. If you interrupt too often, the elders will listen to your rank instead of my record. Rowan's gaze held steady. Then I will be very difficult to provoke. Eloan believed that less than he seemed to want her to. His mouth shifted when she raised a brow. I will try, he amended. Marnie bent over the ledger, shoulders shaking. Button sneezed into the cloak hem. Eloan looked down. That is not yours. Button looked proud of the improvement. For a moment, the side chamber was warm. That was dangerous. Not because warmth was wrong. Because she had spent years accepting cold and calling it maturity. Council bells rang from below. The sound ran through the keep, uneven but clear. Eloan gathered the 12 Luna seals into the velvet-lined box Marnie had found in storage. Button wore only the small satchel containing records and one illegal apple strip. Marnie lifted the ledgers. Her hands shook. Eloan paused by the door. You can still choose silence. Marnie looked at the key ring at her belt. Then at Button, who stared at her with round, expectant eyes. Then at the record in her hands. I wrote it down, Marnie said. Someone should read it. Eloan nodded. Rowan stepped aside to let them pass first. Not in front. Beside. The packed council gathered in the Moon Hall. Eloan had always disliked that room. Not because it was ugly. It was beautiful in the way old power often was. Circular black stone floor. Open roof covered by silver lattice. Wolf banners between the pillars. A raised council table shaped like a crescent. Everything designed so voices carried, and shame had nowhere to hide. She had stood there as Garrick's new Luna 7 years ago, while elders weighed her quiet manner and plain family name against Garrick's affection. Affection had won then. Work had kept winning afterward. No one had named it. Tonight the hall was full. Elders, stewards, guards, kitchen heads, healing hall matrons, border riders, several old mothers wrapped in heavy shawls, Frostmere witnesses along the northern side, Morel's supporters near the east pillar, Lord Denvey in his red council sash, looking sour before the hearing even began. Garrick stood at the Alpha's place. Morel sat 2 seats behind him in a pale blue gown, no silver robe. Her hair was pinned now. Her face had lost its softness. She looked prepared to be wronged professionally. Eloan entered with Marnie on her left and Button on her right. The cow's little bell rang once with each step. Several old mothers leaned forward. One smiled. Eloan held the seal box herself. Rowan entered after them and took the witness position on the northern side, not the main dais. That mattered. He could have claimed higher rank. He did not. Garrick noticed. Morell noticed. The elders noticed. Good. Eloan walked to the center table and set down the box. The hall quieted. Garrick spoke first. This council meets to resolve a domestic disturbance that affected Greyhaven operations and the shared Frost Gate. I regret that private matters have reached public. No, Eloan said. The word rang cleaner than she expected. Garrick's eyes flashed. Eloan, this council meets because the Luna Suite was reassigned without understanding the duties attached to it. The Frost Gate failed because authority was mishandled. That is not domestic. A murmur moved through the hall. Morell stood. She wants to shame me for needing shelter. Button mooed. The old mother who had smiled covered her mouth. Eloan opened the seal box. One by one, she placed the 12 silver seals on the council table. Hearth, Gate, Grain, Night Watch, Healing Hall, Novice Infirmary, Old Mother's Stairs, Frost Road, Council Bell, Guest Law, Boundary Flame, Shared Northern Seal. Each touched stone with a soft, final sound. Eloan looked at the elders. Anyone who wants my room may have it, she said. Anyone who wants my work will hear the list first. Silence. Then Marnie stepped forward. Her face was pale. Her voice, when it came, shook on the first word and steadied on the third. Maintenance record for Luna seals, past 3 years. Lord Denvey made a dismissive sound. Must we suffer clerk drama? Button turned her head toward him. Slowly. He shifted in his chair. Marnie continued. Hearth seal. Dawn feed, dusk feed, storm adjustment, nursery warmth correction. Performed by Lady Eloan Vale, signed weekly. She turned a page. Grain seal. Winter shortage requests, widow allotments, mill repair priority, Northern Road ration reserve. Performed by Lady Eloan Vale. Another page. Old Mother's Stair. Warmth feed and rail charm inspection. Performed by Lady Eloan Vale. One of the old mothers lifted her chin. Marnie's voice grew clearer. Frost Road bead. 3 warnings submitted to Lord Garrick Thorne. Snowmelt Eve, first harvest moon, and last winter dark. No counter-signature received. Marnie turned one more page. Her face changed. Garrick saw it. Do not read private notes. Eloan's fingers tightened on the edge of the duty table. Rowan did not move. His stillness made the order sound smaller. Marnie read anyway. Margin note by Lord Garrick Thorne. Lady Eloan worries because she has nothing better to do after supper. Review after festival. The hall did not breathe. Eloan felt the sentence land in every warm stare, every risen loaf, every border warning he had slept through. She looked at him at last. You called it worry because you did not want to call it work. Garrick's mouth tightened. Eloan looked at him. Not with triumph. That would come later if it came at all. For now she wanted him to hear it. The work had existed before it inconvenienced him. Morell stood abruptly. This is excessive. No one denied she worked. We only asked for kindness. Eloan picked up the guest law seal and held it out. Then take this one. Morell froze. If this was about guest kindness, take the guest law seal. Stand here and name the duties tied to it. I am not trained. No, the word landed hard. Eloan set the seal down. You are not. Lord Denvey leaned forward. Lady Ashbrook never claimed to be trained. She asked for shelter. Lady Eloan responded by punishing the keep. Marnie drew breath. Eloan let her choose. The scribe stepped forward. Lady Ashbrook requested temporary use of hearth, guest law, and grain marks to maintain dignity of the suite, Marnie said. Her petition was copied yesterday. She did not request training. Morell's eyes sharpened. You little, Button moved. Not fast. Button did not believe in haste unless apples were falling. She simply placed herself between Marnie and Morell, lowered her fluffy head, and gave one mild moo. The hall made a sound that was almost laughter and almost shock. Marnie looked down at the cow. Her mouth trembled. Then she kept reading. Lady Ashbrook also had in her possession the Frost Road bead, found wrapped in seal cloth in the pocket of Lady Eloan's robe. My robe, Eloan said. Morel's cheeks flushed. I told you. I thought it belonged with the sweet authority. You thought, Eloan said, that if you held the little piece, the work would follow the room. Morel looked away. That answer was clearer than a confession. Where? Rowan asked from the witness side. Morel blinked. He had not spoken since entering. The hall turned toward him. Rowan's face revealed nothing beyond attention. Where did you find it loose? Morel's mouth opened. No answer came quickly enough. Eloan watched the council see it. Not all of it. Some would resist because pride was a stubborn shelter. But enough. Morel lifted her chin. In the suite. Where in the suite? Rowan asked. Near the hearth. Eloan picked up the Frost Road seal. The bead is stored in the border cabinet, not the hearth wall. Morel's gaze flicked to Garrick. Garrick did not rescue her. That, Eloan thought, might be the first honest thing he had done all day. Lord Denvais stood. We are losing sight of the larger matter. A Luna who removes essential seals during a household disagreement cannot be trusted with them. There it was. The rule he thought would win. Responsibility turned into obedience. Eloan looked at him. Then test them. Denvais stilled. What? Test the seals. If they are property of the room, anyone in the room may carry them. If they are property of the duty, they will answer the hand that maintains them. Morel said, This is a trick. No, Eloan said. It is the work. Garrick's voice came low. Eloan, do not make this worse. He reached toward the seal box. Eloan stepped back half a pace. Before Garrick could close the distance, Rowan moved. He did not seize Garrick. He did not take the box. He only came to stand behind Eloan's right shoulder and placed one hand on the table beside hers, a wall made of restraint instead of threat. The edge of his sleeve brushed the back of her glove. Heat traveled through the cloth before she could forbid herself to notice it. His voice stayed low enough for her alone. Your record first. Eloan hated that her body understood his nearness before her mind had finished refusing it. She also hated that he moved no closer than she allowed. She turned to him. The old mark tightened. Once. Hard. Then eased. Maybe because her choice was clearer now. I am making it visible, she said. She placed the hearth seal at the center of the table. Lady Ashbrook first. Morel did not move. The hall watched. Her supporters watched. Lord Denvais' jaw worked. At last Morel stepped forward. She touched the seal with 2 fingers, as if it might soil her. Nothing happened. The fire has already been disturbed, she said quickly. Eloan did not answer. She placed her own hand over the seal. The hall braziers flared blue gold. Not bright enough to dazzle. Just first row, and make the silver wolf banners stir. A sound moved through the room. Button, startled by the sudden warmth, hopped sideways and bumped into Marnie's skirt. Marnie steadied herself with one hand on Button's back and kept standing. Eloan lifted the grain seal. Morel refused to touch it. Lord Denvais did. Nothing. Eloan touched it. On the far table, a stack of ration tags aligned themselves into 3 neat piles. Button tried to eat one. No, Eloan said without looking. The hall laughed then. Not cruelly. It broke the tension exactly where tension needed breaking. Then Eloan picked up the shared northern seal. The laughter died. Garrick stepped forward. That one is mine to witness. Eloan looked at him. Is it? He held out his hand. She placed the seal before him. Garrick pressed his palm to it. For a breath, nothing happened. Then a thin line of frost crawled over the table edge. Garrick pulled back. Eloan saw real alarm in his face now. Not political alarm. Not embarrassment. He had felt the refusal. She almost pitied him. Almost. Rowan stepped forward to the witness line, but did not cross into the center. The seal recognizes Frostmer's authority on one side, he said. It does not recognize Greyhaven's current line on the other. Lord Denvais snapped, because she disrupted it. Eloan shook her head. Because Greyhaven reassigned duty without duty holder consent, moved the room, granted guest access, and hid the paired bead. Marnie read from the ledger. All actions recorded. Morel's face had gone hard. You all speak as if I wanted Rhodes to fail. I wanted safety. Eloan looked at her stolen robe in memory. The silver cuffs. The repaired seam. The chair by the fire. You wanted safety that cost another woman her name, she said. I understand wanting safety. I do not forgive the price you chose. The hall held still. Then one of the old mothers struck her cane once against the stone. Let the seals answer, Lady Eloan. Another cane followed. Then a guard's spear butt. Then a kitchen head's palm on the bench. The sound built, not wild, not cruel. A public rhythm. A demand for record. Eloan placed both hands on the 12 seals. Her wrist mark turned cold. She kept her hands steady. The seals lit one by one. Hearth. Gate. Grain. Night watch. Healing hall. Novice infirmary. Old mother's stairs. Frost road. Council bell. Guest law. Boundary flame. Shared northern seal. At the last, Button's bell rang by itself. Button jumped, startled by her own importance, and ducked behind Eloan's skirts. The hall laughed again, louder this time, because relief needed somewhere to go. Eloan looked at Garrick. His face was open now in a way she had not seen for years. Regret, yes. Shame, yes. But also understanding arriving after it could no longer be useful to him. I am sorry, he said. The hall heard it. Good. Eloan did not soften. Record it, she said. Marnie did. The ruling took less time than the silence before it. Once the seals had answered, the elders could either accept what the hall had seen or admit they preferred convenience over functioning doors, warm stairs, grain counts, and Frostmere's border road. They were proud. They were not stupid. Lord Denvey tried one final argument about emotional instability. Button chose that moment to return from behind Eloan and place one small hoof on the hem of his council sash. He looked down. Button looked up. No one spoke. Denvey sat. The old mother with the cane nodded, as if that settled the matter. Marnie read the council findings into the record. Lady Morell Ashbrook had no authority to occupy the Luna suite as acting office holder. She would vacate before second bell, return all garments, furnishings, and keys belonging to Eloan Vale or the Luna office, repay winter grain drawn under improper guest authority, and be forbidden from touching Luna seals or seal cabinets for 3 years. She would also sign a public retraction stating that room occupation did not equal Luna authority. Morell's face turned white at the grain repayment. There was the material truth under the silk. Not shame. Cost. Then Eloan looked at the robe still hanging from Morell's shoulders. The hall followed her gaze. Morell clutched the silver wool. Surely you do not mean for me to return it here. Eloan's voice stayed level. No servant will take it from you. Morell's lips parted. You wore the work, Eloan said. You can return the work. For one long, ugly moment, Morell looked toward Garrick. He did not move. She unfastened the pearl toggles with fingers that shook and laid the silver robe across the duty table. Button walked over, sniffed the repaired cuff, and sat beside it like a very small judge guarding evidence. No one laughed. That made it better. Lord Denvey would cover the improper debt protection he had endorsed, the Frostmere delay fee, and 3 months of winter grain revenue for the new Luna office. His elder finance seat would be suspended until thaw. He looked as if someone had asked him to pay for every word he had ever spoken cheaply. Button removed her hoof from his sash only after Marnie finished writing the amount. Garrick Thorne retained his alpha title, but lost unilateral authority over Luna duty seals, shared border mechanisms, and any room assignment carrying office power. Any future adjustment required written consent from the office holder, witnessed by the record bench and countersigned by the affected border party. Rowan said, Frostmere accepts that condition. Eloan watched Garrick absorb the phrase office holder. Not wife. Not temper. Office holder. Finally, the suite itself would be converted. That was the part that made the hall stir. Eloan stood straighter as Marnie read it. The former Luna suite shall be restored as the Greyhaven Luna office, containing public record storage, seal cabinet, duty table, clerk station, and petition hours. Private residents shall be separately assigned, and shall not carry authority by room occupation. Marnie's voice wavered only once. At the words clerk station, Eloan looked at her. Add the appointment. Marnie blinked. My lady, the office requires a record keeper. Garrick said, that appointment should be reviewed. Eloan turned her head. He stopped. A small, complicated satisfaction moved through her. Not because she wanted to humiliate him forever. That would have meant he still held the center of the room. He did not. Marnie did not seem to breathe. Eloan faced the council. Marnie Pell kept the records when it was easier to lose them. She will serve as Luna office scribe with her own desk, key, and salary from the office allotment. Marnie's eyes filled. She did not cry. Button walked over and pressed her nose into Marnie's palm. That nearly ruined her. The old mother struck her cane once. Approved. Several voices followed. Approved. 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 Marnie wrote her own appointment into the record with a hand that shook and did not stop. After the ruling, Morell tried to speak to Garrick. Eloan did not listen. That belonged to them, and not every consequence needed her witness. She collected the seals into the velvet box. This time, she did not place them in Button's satchels. Button had earned retirement from official transport for the evening, and was currently attempting to nose open the old mother's pocket, where there was almost certainly a peppermint. Rowan approached when the hall had begun to empty. He stopped at the edge of the table. "Well done," he said. Eloan closed the box. "You said little. You told me to witness. And you obeyed?" His eyes held a dry spark. With effort. She should not have smiled. She did. Only a little. His gaze dropped to her mouth for one brief, controlled second, then returned to her eyes. There it was again. Not possession. Not hunger sharpened into claim. Interest held on a leash. That felt more dangerous than any boast. Garrick's voice came from behind her. "Eloan." The smile faded. She turned. He stood alone. Morell was gone. His council sash hung crooked, and he looked as if the Moon Hall had taken 10 years from him and given back none of the wisdom in advance. "I meant what I said," he told her. "I am sorry." "I know." His eyes searched her face. "Does that matter?" Eloan considered lying gently. She did not. "Yes," she said. "It matters that you said it where the pack could hear. It does not undo what made it necessary." He swallowed. "Will you come back?" Rowan said nothing. "Good." Eloan rested one hand on the seal box. "I am not leaving Greyhaven tonight," she said. "I am not returning to being your quiet solution either." Garrick flinched. "I will build the Luna office," she continued. "I will decide afterward what bond remains and what does not." His gaze went to her wrist. So did hers. The old mark lay quiet under the sleeve. Not healed. Not gone. Quiet. That would be enough for tonight. Garrick nodded once. It cost him. Not enough to balance anything, but enough to see. "I will not contest the office," he said. "Or Marnie Pell's appointment." "No," Eloan said. "You will fund it." Button mooed from the old mother's pocket. The old mother laughed first. Then Marnie, still crying silently, laughed too. Even Rowan looked away as if the hall window had become fascinating. Garrick closed his eyes. "Yes," he said. "I will fund it for a full winter from my personal treasury." Marnie wrote that down with visible pleasure. The Luna suite looked smaller without the lie in it. By second bell, Morell's trunks were gone. The silver robe lay folded on a chair with the repaired cuffs facing up. Eloan did not touch it at first. The room smelled of cold lilies and expensive soap. She opened the windows. Winter air pushed in. Button marched straight to the hearth rug, sniffed it, and sneezed with deep suspicion. "We will replace it," Eloan said. Marnie stood near the door with a stack of blank ledgers in her arms. Her new key hung from a blue ribbon at her belt. She kept touching it as if it might evaporate. "The desk could go there," she said, nodding toward the east wall. "Near the light." Eloan looked. "Yes. The seal cabinet should not be above the hearth." "No, and if petition hours are in the morning, the kitchen staff can come before meal service." Eloan looked at her. Marnie flushed. "Unless that is too much." "That is exactly enough." The scribe's smile arrived slowly, like dawn making up its mind. Button found the chair where Morell had sat, and began pushing it with her forehead toward the door. Marnie laughed. "She wants it out. She has strong opinions about furniture ethics." The chair moved 2 inches. Button looked offended by its resistance and pushed harder. Eloan helped. So did Marnie. Together they dragged the chair into the corridor, where 2 footmen stared until Eloan told them to take it to guest storage. Not burn it. Not destroy it. Storage was enough. Some victories were stronger when they did not need drama. They worked until lamps were lit. The bed was moved out. A duty table came in from the unused map room. Marnie labeled shelves in a careful square hand. Button received a woven grass mat beside the hearth, tested it, rejected it, turned around twice, then accepted it with visible generosity. The silver robe remained on the old side chair. At last, Aloan picked it up. The cloth was still good. The repair at the cuff had held. She did not want it as a robe anymore. "Marnie," she said, "cut this into ledger wraps tomorrow." Marnie's eyes widened. "The Luna robe? The office needs covers." Button sneezed approval. Marnie touched the fabric, then nodded. "Ledger wraps." A knock came at the open door. Rowan stood outside, not entering. Aloan noticed that first. He had changed from riding coat to a dark formal jacket, but he still looked more like a man prepared for weather than court. In one hand, he held a folded document sealed in black silver. "Frostmere's counter-signature for the temporary border arrangement," he said. Marnie took one eager step, then stopped and looked to Aloan. Aloan nodded. Marnie crossed to receive it. Rowan handed it to her, as if she had always been the correct person to receive important documents. Marnie's spine straightened. Good man, Aloan thought, then immediately distrusted the thought for being too simple. Men were not good because they performed one correct gesture. But gestures mattered. Patterns mattered more. She had time to watch patterns now. Marnie took the document to the new duty table and began logging it. Button rose from her mat, walked to Rowan, and sniffed his boot. He looked down. "She has inspected your office," he said. "She inspected your boot. That is more intimate than Frostmere protocol usually allows." Aloan huffed one quiet laugh. Button licked the edge of his boot, apparently decided Frostmere leather lacked flavor, and returned to her mat. Rowan's gaze moved around the room. Empty bed space. New table. Shelves. Seal box. Marnie writing. Button settling. "You did not take the suite back," he said. "No, you changed what it meant." "Yes." He looked at her then. The room had grown warm from the restored hearth. She wore her own black gown, his cloak folded over the back of a chair, the old robe waiting to become ledger covers. For the first time since yesterday, nothing in the room belonged to a lie. Rowan stepped one pace closer to the threshold and stopped again. "When you open the next door," he said, "may I be outside it?" Marnie's quill stopped. Button's bell gave one tiny sound as she adjusted on the mat. Aloan looked at Rowan across the threshold. The old mate mark rested quiet beneath her sleeve. Not erased. Not answered. A scar of a promise she would decide how to handle in daylight, with records and witnesses and no one rushing her toward mercy. She was tired. She was not empty. That difference mattered. "I do not know which door comes next," she said. "I did not ask to choose it." No heat rushed. No music swelled. No moonbeam selected him from the world. Aloan simply stood in the first room that had become hers by her own hand and recognized that the man at the door had asked a question instead of making a claim. That was not love. Not yet. It was worth remembering. "You may stand outside," she said. His mouth softened. He did not cross the threshold. He only lifted one hand, palm up, asking without a word. Aloan looked at that hand for one long breath. Then she set her gloved fingers in his. Only for a second. His thumb rested against the outside of her glove, warm and still, as if even comfort had to wait for permission. She took her hand back first. He let her. Button chose that moment to roll onto her back, all four little legs in the air, demanding the room acknowledge her exhaustion. Marnie laughed. Aloan laughed too. A real laugh this time. Small. Brief. Hers. Outside, Greyhaven's bells rang for night watch, steady now that the seals had been properly recorded. The frost gate warning bead glowed low and calm in its cabinet. The old mother's stare held warmth. The kitchen sent up the smell of bread that had finally risen. Tomorrow there would be petitions. Garrick's apology would need more than words. Morel's repayment had been entered. Denvey's finance seat had been suspended until thaw. Garrick's apology would sit in the record until actions proved it useful. The mate mark would be discussed in the right chamber, with the right witnesses when Aloan chose. Tonight, the Luna office had a table, a scribe, a cow with a title no one had officially granted, and 12 seals that answered to work instead of pretense. Aloan placed the seal box on the new table. Marnie wrote the first line of the first office ledger. Button snored before the ink dried. And Rowan Blackmere, Dragon Wolf King of Frostmere, remained outside the door until Aloan looked up and said, "You may come in for bread." He entered only then. Not as a rescuer. Not as an owner. As a witness invited after the work was done. If you were sitting in that moon hall, would you have given Aloan back the sweet, or helped her turn it into something stronger? Tell me what you would have chosen, and subscribe for more rejected Luna stories where the woman who was pushed aside comes back with proof, power, and one very opinionated pet.